From this view, impersonal would clearly mean irrational, unintelligent, and material, and we don't believe any Indian writer would desire to use this word in relation to the deity if they only understood its signification. From the statement that God is nirguna and not saguna, it follows that God can neither have birth nor death. This is one of the central doctrines of Shaiva Siddhanta, and in this respect it differs from all the existing forms of faith, whether Hindu or otherwise, except perhaps Mohammedanism and the Unitarian form of Christianity. The unborn with the braided hair, supreme grace, the undying, bestow bliss on all, O thou worship. If worshipped, thy Maya will vanish without doubt. St. Tirumular. Of course, it must stand to reason that our soul itself is neither born nor can it die. What is born or what dies is the material body formed of Maya or guna associated with it from the beginning. These repeated births and deaths can occur on account of the peculiar link subsisting between the soul and matter, and therefore the souls comprising all sakalars are called saguna. This same peculiar link does not subsist between God and matter, and hence he is nirguna. So it is, God can neither be born in the womb nor die. This peculiar doctrine of Shaiva Siddhanta is what should elevate it to the highest rank of philosophy, and the latest discoveries in science could not shake its foundation. One other feature of Shaiva Siddhanta in regard to the Godhead we will mention before we close this paper, and that is that the Supreme Brahman and this school called Shiva or Shivam is not to be confounded with the Hindu Trinity. God is peculiarly denoted by the word Shivam, Shankara, Shambho, Rudra, he who removes sorrow, as they express the most spiritual nature of God as love and all-beneficent, and that this is no sectarian conception of the deity, and that the God of the Shaiva Siddhantis is the universal God of all the nations and all religions, is finally brought about by Saint Arulnandi Shivacharyar in his very first verse in Shivajnana Siddhyar. Let me place on my head the feet of Shiva, who stands as the goal of each of the 6 forms of religion, and who stands in the various forms conceived of by the various internal schools of Shaiva faith, and yet stands beyond the conception of all Vedas and Agamas, and fills all intelligences with his love, and becomes my heavenly Father and Mother, and fills one and all inseparably. To sum up, according to the true Vedanta Siddhanta philosophy, God is Sat, Chit, Ananda, not material nor enveloped in matter, nirguna and personal, ever blissful and all love. And all his acts, such as creation, etc., are prompted by such love. He is neither he, she, nor it, nor has he any material rupa or arupa, and he can reveal his grace and majesty to those who love him. He cannot be born, nor can he die, and as such indeed he is the pure and absolute and infinite being, able to lift up humanity, wallowing in the bounds of Mala, Maya, and Karma. To know him as our true Heavenly Father and Mother, and love him as such, is the only panacea for all the evils of erring mankind. Advaita according to the Shaiva Siddhanta. In a former paper, contributed to the New Reformer, we dwelt on the personality of God as understood in the Shaiva school, and we proposed to dwell at length on the Advaita philosophy as expounded by the Siddhanta writers, and we crave the earnest attention of all students of Indian philosophy, and we confidently hope that as this philosophy is more and more understood, it is bound to win its way into the hearts and hopes of all sincere people of every religion. As we pointed out in our last paper, this philosophy has only been placed before the world at large without being hidden under a bushel within a short time, and there is all the future before it, when it can shine like a beacon light from the summit of the loftiest hill. And first we have to point out the word Advaita, pure and simple, is used to describe their philosophy by all Siddhanta writers, and the word Vishishtadvaita never finds place in the Siddhanta literature. People who for the first time hear of this philosophy put it down at once as Vishishtadvaita without pausing to inquire into its real aspects. But as we said above, all Shaiva Siddhantis call themselves strict Advaitis. Saint Mikandar uses the word Advaita in his commentary on the second sutra of Shivajnana Bodham and expounds his system of Advaita. In another place, he calls his system Advaita and addresses his pupils as Advaiti. Saint Umapati Shivacharya uses it in the following introductory verse in Shiva Prakasham. We expound here the beauty of Shaiva Siddhanta, the cream of the Vedanta, whose excellent merit consists in its exposition of the Advaita, postulating an inseparable relation like body and soul, eye and sun, the soul and the eye, supported as it is by the Dharma of the highest authoritative books, and unlike the Beda and Beda and Abeda relations illustrated, respectively, by light and darkness, word and meaning, gold and ornament, set forth by other schools, and which is further supported by perfectly logical methods, and is light to the truth seekers and darkness to others. Saint Tayamanavar uses the word freely and has this verse in praise of his Parama Guru Saint Mikandar. Oh, for the day when I can reach the feet of my Lord, who found the truth of the pure Advaita, and which could not be comprehended by persons dwelling in untruth. There is another verse of his also in which he uses the word twice, illustrating and explaining the meaning of the word itself, and which will be discussed later on. Oh, for the day when I will be in Advaita relation with God, as I am now in Advaita relation with Anava, the world. Going back to the word itself, it occurs in the following passages of the Veda and Upanishads, and in a few other places. Eka eva rudro nadvityaya tashte, Yajurveda 186. Eko hi rudro nadvitaya tashte, Svetasvara Upanishad 3.2. Ekamedvad vityam, Chandogya Upanishad 6.2.1. Santam Shivam Advaitam Chaturtham Atma, Mandukya Upanishad 7. Amatras Chaturtattva Vakarika Prapuncha Pashamas Shivadvaitavave, the partless fourth, incomprehensible that ends all going out, Shivadvaitam, Mardukya Upanishad 12. The first two texts give the word in its original form, Nadvityam, and the word now in use has been got by deletion of the letter M, and Na is the negative prefix. The word literally means, therefore, no to or not to. The word is used in the text quoted above, and as read with the context would not convey all the philosophic meaning which has been imported into it by the acharyas of various schools. It simply meant there was no other person except the one mentioned at the time. In the first text, it meant that there was only one God and no second. However this be, we have to deal with the word as brought into use by the various schools, and the negative prefix has been taken to mean variously. This prefix is said to connote 1. Abhava, positive negation, 2. Sadrisyam, and 3. Viroda, or the opposite. Both in Sanskrit and in English, the same prefix or word is used to denote the first two meanings, but in Tamil we have two different words, and to denote these two different meanings. If in the word Advaitam the first meaning be taken, it would mean that one or two of the two or both would be non-existent, and it would mean only one out of the two or neither. Shivajnana Swamigal points out that almost all the acharyas of other schools, including Shankara, Ramanuja, and Madhva, make it to mean one, taking the abhava meaning. If the Sadrisya meaning be taken, it would mean non-different or non-dual. This meaning is best explained and illustrated by taking the first stanza of chapter 36 of the sacred Kural, entitled How to Perceive Truth. The delusion whereby men deem that the truth which is not, that is the cause of hapless birth. Here the word used means of the two things before us, say a copy of Kural and a copy of Shivajnana Bodham. If one mistakes one book for the other, this would be delusion, mityajnanam, or false knowledge, or avidya, or ignorance. Here the existence of two books is not denied, but if other used were words instead, then the meaning would be altogether altered, and it would mean there being no copy of Kural before us at all. We fancy there is a copy of Kural before us. In the former case, the reality of the objects before us is not questioned. In the latter case, the reality of the object presented before us is denied. In the familiar example of shell and silver, both objects and ideas are real, and we can never have these conceptions unless both were real and different. The delusion arises from the fact that we mistake one thing, shell, for the silver which is not, and this arises also because on account of the resemblance which exists between these objects, shell and silver, or the two books. When there was no shell before us, the silver would present itself before us. This would illustrate the above meaning, but ordinarily no such object or idea will present itself before us. This same difference will be felt throughout in the working of the two systems. One holds the world, including the body and the soul, as real, but ordinarily we often mistake the body for the soul and minister to its wants instead of seeking the soul's salvation. And so too we mistake the soul for God. If we only understood the true nature of each of these, and understood the transient nature of the pleasures of the body, and gave them up for the eternal bliss of the union with God, our path would be clear. Saint Tiruvallur follows up this view and states in his second stanza, "Darkness departs with which we have been identifying ourselves before, and rapture springs to men who see the mystic vision pure, from all delusion free." In this view, no attempt is made to deny the reality of the world and sin, and ourself and God, but one is asked to discriminate one thing from the other. In the other view, there is no world, no sin, no soul, and all these fantasies arise. But there is no reply to the question, how? However, let it be premised that the Siddhanta writers take the negative prefix to mean not abhava, but sadrisya, and we will proceed to show how they develop their system. Count Tolstoy defines religion as a certain relation established by man between his separate personality and the endless universe, or its source, and morality as the perpetual guiding of life which flows from this relation, and Siddhanta writers attempt to trace alike this relation between God and man and the world, and thereby discover the means or sadhana for our guidance whereby we can get rid of all pain and sin. And the first postulate is contained in two words in the second sutra of Shivajnana Bodham. God is one with them and different. And Saint Arulnandi Shivacharya adds another relation, one and different. Here then is involved abheda, bheda, and bheda-bheda relations. But other schools postulate one or other of these relations, and the similes used are gold and ornament to denote the abheda relation, darkness and light to denote beta relation, and word and meaning to denote the beta-beta relation. And there can be no reconciliation between these views, and no meeting place between them. The Siddhanta postulates all these different relations, but by other similes, such as body and soul to denote abheda, eye and the sun to denote beta, soul and the eye to denote beta-beta, as set forth above in the stanza quoted from St. Umapati Shivacharya, and yet so as not to be contradictory. There must therefore be something peculiar in this view which makes it possible to admit of all these different relationships or aspects, and yet not to be self-contradictory and to appear as one harmonious whole. And it is this peculiar relation which cannot be easily defined or described that is denoted by the word Advaita. And St. Makandar accordingly discusses this word in his first argument. The word Advaita cannot mean oneness or ekam. No one can think of himself as one, and the very thought implies two things. The word simply denies the separateness of the two. Anyanasti, and hence God is said to be one with the souls. That is to say, Advaita is Ananya, or non-different. The relation is such that though there be difference in substance, no separation is possible, and the word is used to emphasize its non-different character, and he instances the case of a man and his body. Though these are different, yet man identifies himself with the body, owing to the inseparable connection between the two, and so practically they are one or non-different. So too the soul identifies itself with God, though God is not the soul, and the soul is not God, and hence God is one, and not one with the soul. And in the second stanza, he develops this argument and analyzes the text, ekam advityam, and illustrates it. In the Vedic text, ekam means that there is only one, and that one is the Pati, Lord. You who say there is one is the Pashu bound up in Pasha. The word Advaita means that beside God nothing else will exist, as when we say that there will be no other letters, consonants, when the vowel A is not, and the meaning will be clear when the illustration is fully understood. The illustration is that of a vowel and consonants, i.e. soul and body. The vowel becoming one with the consonants is natural union, is the Nanal Sutra. And the illustration of body and mind or soul was what was stated in the first stanza, so that we have two illustrations to describe the relation of God to the world, and these two illustrations going by the same name show that the relation between mind and body is what obtains between vowels and consonants. Vishishtadvaita writers have no doubt used the illustration of mind and body, but nowhere do they discuss the nature of this relation, much less do they seem to have apprehended the analogy of vowels and consonants. Dr. Bain discusses this question in his book on mind and body, and we wrote on the subject in the Siddhanta Dipika, Volume 2, page 13, and this is reproduced in pages 52 through 63 of this book, so that whatever word we may use, the nature of this relationship is clear. If the Vedic texts postulate oneness, it is in a higher sense than what is understood in the current philosophies. In this position is reached a higher and truer monism. We have shown how true it is that Saint Mikandar stated that there is no other letter but A. So it is, we can state, there is nothing else but God, only one without a second. This comes as the result of the highest experience of jnana, or svanubhava, or shivanubhava, and this is stated in the central stanza of Tiruvachagam, its Hridaya sloka. This day in thy mercy unto me thou didst drive away the darkness, and stand in my heart as the rising sun. Of this thy way of rising, there being naught else but thou, I thought without thought. I drew nearer and nearer to thee, wearing away atom by atom, till I was one with thee. Our Shiva, dweller in the great holy shrine. Thou art not aught in the universe, naught is there save thou. Who can know thee? As man nears God, he wears away atom by atom, so that at the moment of union nothing of him is left, and what is left is the presence of the Supreme, one only, and the feeling of his presence, and no feeling or consciousness of feeling of himself or others. This feeling of the presence and bliss of God is one and Advaita, and there is no consciousness of such oneness or bliss, and duality will certainly arise the moment man regains consciousness. So what he is said to lose, in fact, atom by atom, is his various conscious selves. Though ether, wind, fire, water, earth should fail, his constant being fails not, knows no weariness. In him my body, soul, and thought and mind were merged, lost. How all myself was lost, sing we and beat Telenam. From Reverend Dr. G. U. Pope's translation. His bodily consciousness, his life consciousness, his mental consciousness, all these alone constitute his individuality, the feeling of I and mine. This I-ness is what has got to be rid of, so that when this I-ness or individuality is lost, he becomes Shivam or God. What perishes, of course, is the soul's individuality or consciousness of I-ness, inducing duality, but what subsists even in moksha is the soul's personality, which has Svanubhava or Shivanubhava, identifying itself with God. The soul in union with God becomes pure object, God, as it were, which is the true monism of science. Hence it is, St. Macandar states this paradox, when becoming one with God, if the soul perished, there will be nothing to unite with God as it perishes. If it did not perish, it cannot become one with God. Just like the salt dissolved in water, the soul, after losing its mala, unites itself with his feet, and becomes the servant of God, loses its I-ness or individuality. Then it will have no darkness as separation. The salt in its crystalline conditions constitutes its individuality. In that condition it is distinguished from water, but after it is dissolved in water, what is lost is its individual character, and not itself or its substance or personality. The following sentence from a textbook of science will show how exact is our language. When a river enters the sea, it soon loses its individuality. It becomes merged with the body of the ocean. When it loses its current, and when therefore it has no power to keep in suspension the sediment which it had brought down from the higher lands. If reread as follows, its application will become clear. When the soul loses its individuality, feeling of I-ness, ahankaram or anavam, it becomes merged in God when it loses its karma, and when therefore it has no power to keep in suspension its mala with which it has been associated from the beginning. And this is the exact figure and language used by Saint Macandar in Shivajnana Bodham 8.4a. This losing of the self is the real sacrifice brought about by love. It is this sacrifice we are asked to make as we enter the temple, and the moment we make it, our pasutvam will leave us, and we will become the Nandi, the blissful Shiva. That the Siddhanta marks the highest standard of monistic truth is what is brought about by St. Tirumolar also in his famous line, Vedanta postulates aham brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Siddhanta postulates tat, one, alone. That is to say that the Siddhanta appeals fully and finally to only one experience, the bliss of God, and one alone, whereas the Vedanta has reference to the Soham paths, whereby this experience is gained, and anyone can perceive that the Soham experience is a conscious one and a dual one, or Dvaita. In this sense, Siddhanta is Advaita and Vedanta is Dvaita, and what are considered as the strongholds of Vedanta by followers of Shankara admit of easy interpretation by the Siddhantis. The question, as pointed out by Shivajnana Yogi, did not arise absolutely as to whether padarthas were one or two. It arose in connection with the famous Mahavakya text, Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasmi, etc., says he. If you ask, what then is the meaning of the word Advaitam, I will show how Shaiva Siddhantis explain it. On hearing the great texts called Mahavakya, Tattvamasi, etc., which are used in the three persons, we see that these sentences speak of that as one substance, and thou as another, and inquire how one can become the other. The answer is given to remove the doubt by stating how one can become the other and what relation subsists between these two, and the word Advaitam is used to express this peculiar relation. The word does not mean one or non-existence of two or more, but is used to express the peculiar relation that exists between two distinct things which can become one, and we had long ago called attention to this meaning in our very first exposition of Shivajnana Yogi, and we observed, see Shivajnana Bodham, page 17, though in all these cases an identity is perceived, a difference in substance is also felt. It is this relation which could not be easily postulated in words, but which may perhaps be conceived, and which is seen as two, Dvaitam, and at the same time as not two, Advaitam. It is this relation which is called Advaitam, a unity in duality, and the philosophy which postulates it, the Advaita philosophy. Of all the mass of the Vedic and Theosophic literature that has come into existence during the last 2 or 3 decades, there is none that equal the writings of Professor Kunt for real insight into the nature of Hindu philosophy and critical acumen. And this summary, added at the end of the first pada of the first Adhyaya of his translation of the Brahma Sutras, is a most beautiful and original one. Wonderful as it may seem, both Shivajanana Yogi and Kunt exactly propound the same questions and give the same answer. He shows there are texts in the Upanishads which support the dualistic and monistic view, and the mainstay of the monists are the Mahavakya texts, and these texts are the great stumbling block in the path of dualists. And he shows that their interpretation cannot bear an examination, because the texts evidently do not admit of it, and all that they say is simply beside the mark. What is to be done? There are doubtless a few texts in the Veda which support the pantheistic views. Most, however, support the theistic principles. But so long as pantheistic texts are not explained, the proposition that the Vedas do not teach pantheism cannot be accepted. Again, the adjustment and the interpretation proposed by the theists cannot be accepted because of their being far-fetched and forced. But we do not see how the few pantheistic texts come in the way of theism, because we believe that though they be interpreted as the pantheists do, yet they support theism. How can this be? And he proceeds to show how this can only be understood in the light of yoga. After instancing the various forms of bhakti, charya, and kriya, he says, but there is a special feature of such adoration, a feature not included in any of these. It is the ecstatic condition of the spirit, a condition which can neither be explained nor understood without an illustration. Let the reader realize the love a mother has for her child. A mother or her child sometimes experiences a state of mind, an indescribable state. That which either of them expresses can alone convey an idea of their feelings when they are in the ecstatic condition. The mother directly addresses the child thus: O my piece of gold, O my soul, O my life, can I eat you up? Under these circumstances, the mother forgets that her body is different from that of her child, which experiences the same feeling. Such an identity is the form of the ecstatic condition of the mind. This is a special feature of adoration. This sort of ecstatic identity the yogis feel. Hence the Veda and the Upanishads, the pantheistic doctrine of the identity of the human spirit and the Supreme Spirit, if enunciated, is enunciated in this way. Again, the Brahma Sutra of Badarayana does not inculcate it. And he explains further below, the characteristic feature of the Indian Vedanta is its recognition of spirit power, as it is explained in the Yoga Sutras, which systematically lay down the following propositions: that the Supreme Spirit or God is related to the human spirit, that the human spirit has very great potential powers, and that if certain methods of living be adopted, it can call out its powers and become actually able to know the past and the future, and that the spirit disenthralled from the flesh is ultimately absorbed in one sense into the Supreme Spirit. The yoga system is properly the backbone of the Vedanta. And we had pointed out in another place, Personality of God, pages 223 to 243, that the Yoga Pada is not merely the backbone of Vedanta, but it is Vedanta itself. It is not well understood that the word Upanishad really means the same thing as yoga. Yoga means the sadhana required for bringing the soul and God in union, and the Upanishad is also the teaching of the sadhana, whereby man comes nearer and nearer to God, by destroying the bonds that bind him. The root meaning, upa, near, ni, quite, sad, to perish, is hit off to a nicety in the famous line in Tiruvachakam quoted above, the house of God, 7th verse. Nearer and nearer to thee I drew, wearing away atom by atom till I was one with thee. And in the passage in Chandogya Upanishad 1.1.10 and in several others, the word Upanishad is used as a synonym for yoga. And this derivation really explains the scope of an Upanishad, a misunderstanding of which has led to no end of confusion. The Siddhanta takes the Upanishad as the textbook of the Yoga Pada or school. The higher stage or Pada being the Jnana Pada, the words Upanishad, Vedanta, Yoga, Sahamarga or Sohamarga or Hamsamarga are all synonymous. And as Vedanta strictly means yoga, the words Vedanta and Siddhanta are contrasted, Siddhanta meaning the Jnana Marga or Pada, though it embraces all the remaining Padas, Charya, Kriya, and Yoga. The practice involved in the Mahavakya texts is the Soham or Shivoham, and when this practice is matured, the soul stands in complete allegiance to the Supreme One, renouncing all idea of self and self-action. Then can the soul say, I am all the world. Shiva Jnana Bodham 2.1.4. In me everything originated, in me everything established, in me everything merges. That secondless Brahman am I. Kaivalya Upanishad 21. As Professor Kuntz speaks of the potential power of man by calling out which he can become one with God, Shivajnana Yogi dwells at great length and too frequently on this special characteristic, or power of man, whereby man can be said to become God. And this power is the power of the soul, to become that to which it is united. In the language of Saint Makandar, and the language of St. Tayamanavar, this power is likened to that of the crystal or mirror. Says Professor Henry Drummond, all men are mirrors. That is the first law on which this formula of sanctification or corruption is based. One of the aptest descriptions of a human being is that he is a mirror. This illustration is to be originally found in the Upanishads and Gita. As a metal disc mirror tarnished by dust shines bright again after it has been cleansed, so the one incarnate person, satisfied and free from grief, after he has seen the real nature of himself. And when by real nature of himself he sees, as by a lamp, the real nature of the Brahman, then, having become the unborn eternal God who transcends all tattvas, he is freed from all pasha, Svetashvatara Upanishad 2.14.15, from meditating him, Abhidyanath, from joining him, Yojanath, from becoming one with him, Tattva Bhavat, there is further cessation of all Maya in the end, Svetashvatara Upanishad 1.10. And as a flame is enveloped by smoke, as a mirror by dust, and as an embryo is wrapped by the womb, so this soul is enveloped by it, desire, Bhagavad Gita 3.3. And Saint Makandar has this stanza, 8.3a. The principle of it receives its exposition of the Sankhya and in the Yoga Sutras by means of its illustration of mirrors and colors. Though it, the soul, be unassociated, still there is a tinging reflectionally through non-discrimination, for there is not a real tinge in that which is unassociated with tincture or anything else. Still there is as it were a tinge. Hence the tinge is treated simply as reflection by those who discriminate the tinge from the soul, which it delusively seems to belong to. As is the case with the hibiscus and the crystal, there is not a tinge but a fancy that there is such. Sankhya Aphorism 6.27-28. Gabley's translation. In the words of Professor Max Mueller, this is how the subject is treated in the Yoga Sutras. Now, if we ask what is the result of all this, we are told in Sutra 41 that a man who has put an end to all the motions and emotions of his mind obtains with regard to all objects of his senses formation grounded on them, or steadiness and consubstantiation, the idea being that the idea is modified or changed by the objects perceived. 141, as a crystal, when placed near a red flower, becomes really red to our eyes. In the same way, the mind is tinged by the objects perceived. Six Systems, page 453. This principle of mind identifying itself with the objects perceived is stated in the following passages of the Upanishad also. Now a man is like this or that, according as he acts and according as he behaves, so will he be. A man of good acts will become good, a man of bad acts bad. He becomes pure by pure deeds, bad by bad deeds. As is his desire, so is his will, and as is his will, so is his deed. Whatever deeds he does, that he will reap. Whatever object man's own mind is attached to that he goes strenuously with his deed. He who desires the Atman, being Brahman, he goes to Brahman. That Atma is indeed Brahman. Similar passages are found in the Mahabharata, and the familiar statement of it in Sanskrit is Yat Bhavam Tat Bhavati. Herbert Spencer calls this union as one of absolute identity, and this is almost the language used by Saint Mikandar, as the Upanishad writers, Sankhyans and Yogins and Siddhantins state this principle and base on it their scheme of salvation. So does also Professor Henry Drummond in his remarkable address entitled The Changed Life, based on the text from St. Paul. We all, with unveiled face, reflecting as a mirror the glory of the Lord, are transformed into the same image, from glory to glory, even as from the Lord the Spirit. He paraphrases the sentence as follows: We all, reflecting as a mirror the character of Christ, are transformed into the same image, from character to character, from a poor character to a better one, from a better one to one a little bit better still, from that to one still more complete, until by slow degrees the perfect image is attained. Here the solution of the problem of sanctification is compressed into a sentence. Reflect the character of Christ, and you will become like Christ. Or, as we will say, reflect the image of God in yourself, and you will become godlike or God. But how is the poor character to be made better and better, or the reflecting image clearer and clearer? It is by cleansing the mirror soul, freer and freer from dirt, and bringing it more and more in line with the effulgent light, that this can be effected. And when the mirror is absolutely perfect and nearest, the light shines brightest, and so overpowers the mirror that the mirror is lost to view, and the glory and light of the Lord are felt. For, observes the learned professor truly, what you are conscious of is the glory of the Lord, and what the world is conscious of, if the result be a true one, is also the glory of the Lord. In looking at a mirror, one does not see the mirror or think of it, but only of what it reflects, for a mirror never calls attention to itself, except when there are flaws in it. These flaws are the colors of the Siddhanti, who compares them to the Maya or body. In union with the body, it is the body alone that is cognized, and not the mirror-like soul. In union with God, the glory and light alone are perceived, and not the mirror-like soul either. And the professor declares, all men are mirrors. That is the first law on which this formula of sanctification or corruption is based. One of the aptest descriptions of a human being is that he is a mirror, and we must beg our readers to go through the whole pamphlet to note how beautifully he draws out this parallel. He notes the second principle which governs this process, namely the law of assimilation or identification. This law of assimilation is the second and by far the most impressive truth which underlies the formula of sanctification. The truth that men are not only mirrors, but that these mirrors, so far from being mere reflections of the fleeting things they see, transfer into their own inmost substance and hold in permanent preservation the things that they reflect. No one can know how the soul can hold these things. No one knows how the miracle is done. No phenomenon in nature, no process in chemistry, no chapter in necromancy can even help us to begin to understand this amazing operation. For think of it, the past is not only focused there in a man's soul, it is there. How could it be reflected from there if it were not there? All things he has ever seen, known, felt, believed of the surrounding world are now within him, have become part of him, in part are him. he has been changed into their image. These two principles, in fact, underlie our mantra and tantra, our upasana and sadhana, bhavana and yoga, and our books instance the case of the snake charmer chanting the Garuda mantra in illustration of this second principle of assimilation or identification. The professor instances from Darwin how, in the working out of this principle of association and assimilation or identity in the human and animal evolution, persons ever associated with pigs get piggy faces, and with horses, horsey faces. In the case of husband and wife, when they have been perfectly loving, it has been found to effect a complete assimilation of their features. Such is the power of the human mind, both a demerit and a merit. It can lower itself to the very depths of the brute, or it can rise to the very height of godhood. This law is spoken of in our textbooks as the law of Garudadyanam. The writer of the book Spiritual Law in the Natural World, Purdy Publishing Company, Chicago, observes that all who have made a study of the cause of all things have become so at one with it, as to have causing power, for it is an invariable rule that we become like what we study or are closely associated with. We become so like people with whom we live constantly that the expression of face and sound of voice grow similar, and even features grow alike. Sometimes a child will look more like its nurse than its mother, and the whole book is an exposition of this principle, and it holds out as a sadhana for spiritual elevation that a man should firmly believe that there is no world, no untruth, no sin, no sickness, no death, and he is a child of God, that there is only truth, power, love, and presence in this universe, and nothing but this, that he is the reflection of God, the image and likeness of God, and then he can truly conquer sickness and death, and become truly the Son of God. This is exactly the Soham Bhavana or Shivaham Bhavana, and the following verse of St. Arulnandi Shivacharya sums up the whole teaching. Say, I am not the world, and I am separate from it. Say also, I am not the unknowable Supreme One. Then unite with him indissolubly by loving him in all humility, and practice Soham, I am he. Then will he appear to you as yourself. Your mala will all cease, just as the poison is removed by Garudadhyana, and you will become pure. So it is the old Vedas teach us to practice this mantra, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. As this right knowledge of non-difference and difference of ourselves from God and the universe is essential for our salvation, Srikantha discusses these questions in his Bhashya on the Sutras 2, 1, 21 through 3, and we quote the whole of these passages, and he quotes and beautifully reconciles the numerous Veda Srutis with the Mahavakya texts. The Sutrakara raises and refutes an objection to the foregoing theory. Jiva being mentioned to be one with the other, there follows an incongruity such as neglecting what is good. 2:121. Objection. Because in the words that thou art and this Atman is Brahman, Jiva the effect. Objection. Because in the words that thou art and this Atman is Brahman, Jiva, the effect, is mentioned as one with Brahman, because it has been shown that they are not distinct from each other. In that case, it would follow that the all-knowing and all-pervading Parameshvara dissolves the universe for his own good and creates it for his own evil. Then it may be asked, how is it that Ishvara, who is all-knowing and of unfailing will, and who knows that the pain of Jiva, who is no other than himself, is his own pain, engages himself in the creation of the universe, which as leading to samsara is an evil, and does not abstain from creation for his own good. Accordingly, once it is proved that Jiva and Parameshvara are one, there follows this incongruity that Parameshvara, though all-knowing, is guilty of a want of sense, insofar as he abstains from what is good to himself and engages in what conduces to his own evil. Wherefore it does not stand to reason that Jiva and Ishvara, the cause and the effect, are one. Answer. In reply we say as follows. But the cause is superior because of the mention of a distinction, 2:122. Though the cause and effect are one, the cause is declared in the Sruti to be superior to the effect, to the sentient and insentient universe, in such passages as the following. Superior to the universe is Rudra, the mighty sage. So a distinction is also made between Jiva and Parameshvara in the following passages. But he who controls both Vidya and Avidya is another. The one God rules the perishable Pradhana and Atman, thinking that the Atman is different from the mover, the Lord. Two birds, inseparable friends, cling to the same tree. Two Brahmans ought to be known, the superior and the inferior. There are two, one knowing, the other not knowing, both unborn, one strong and the other weak. He is the eternal among eternals, the sentient among the sentient. Having entered within, he is the ruler of the creatures. Know then, Prakriti is Maya, and the great Lord the Mayin. From that, the Mayin sends forth all this, in that the other is bound up through that Maya. When he sees the other, the Lord is contented, then his grief passes away. He is the master of nature and of man, the Lord of the three qualities. Of these creatures, Pashus, the Pashupati is the Lord. Wherefore quite superior to the universe is Brahman, otherwise called Shiva. Objection. By establishing non-duality in 2:115 and duality in 2:122, you have only proved duality and non-duality of Brahman and the universe. Answer. No, we do not establish that sort of Vishishtadvaita which takes the form of duality and non-duality. We are not the advocates of an absolute distinction between Brahman and the universe as between a pot and a cloth, because of its opposition to the Sruti declaring that they are not quite distinct from each other. Neither are we the advocates of an absolute identity, as of the mother of pearl and silver, one of them being illusory, for it is opposed to the Sruti, which points to a difference in the inherent attributes of Brahman and the universe. Nor do we hold to duality and non-duality, which is opposed to the nature of things. On the other hand, we maintain that the unity of Brahman, as the cause and the effect, is like that of the body and of the embodied, or like that of the substance and its attribute. By unity of Brahman and the universe, we mean their inseparability, like that of clay and the pot, as cause and effect, or like that of the substance and its attribute. A pot, indeed, is not seen apart from clay, nor is the blue lotus seen apart from the color blue. Similarly, apart from Brahman, no potentiality of the universe can exist, nor is Brahman ever known apart from something else. The former must ever be conditioned by the latter, and this latter is naturally one with the former. Wherefore Brahman, who is in no way separable from the universe, is said to be one with the other, and there is a natural distinction between the two, so that the Supreme Brahman is even higher than the universe. As to their distinction as to the cause and the effect, it has been already explained in 2:19. Wherefore this theory is quite unopposed to the Srutis declaring distinction as well as non-distinction, and as in the case of stone, etc., it is incongruous. 2:123. Objection. Under all conditions, Jiva and Ishvara are one, because of the Srutis declaring non-duality. Answer. No, because of an incongruity. Jiva and Ishvara cannot be identical because, like the insentient stone, timber, grass, etc., the Jiva also is, on account of ignorance, etc., said to belong to quite a distinct class from the Ishvara, who is possessed of such attributes as omniscience. Therefore, Ishvara is a distinct entity from Jiva. Thus, even the Jiva, sentient as he is, cannot be identical with Ishvara, owing to this difference that the latter is superior. Much less can the insentient existence, which is essentially different, be identical with Ishvara. From all standpoints of view, by Sruti, Smriti, and reasoning, we see that the omniscient and omnipotent Parameshvara is quite superior to the whole universe, sentient and insentient though, as his own emanation, it is not altogether distinct from him. And he brings out the non-difference more by means of the simile of soul and the body in his commentary on 121. All this is Brahman, as beginning and breathing in him, and therefore let a man meditate on him. This passage may be explained as follows. The origin, existence, and end of all this depends on Brahman. All this, both the sentient and the insentient existence, is verily Brahman. And therefore let a man meditate on Brahman, tranquil in mind, just as water bubbles, which have their origin, existence, and end in the ocean, are found to be only forms of that ocean, so too that which depends for its origin, etc., on Brahman, associated with Shakti, must be made up of Brahman and nothing else. Nothing distinct from him is ever perceived. Accordingly, in the Atharvashiras, it has been declared by Ishana as follows: Alone I was at first, alone I am and shall be, there is none else distinct from me. And then was declared by him in the words, I am Brahman, that the whole universe is his own form. And in the words, he entered the more hidden from or than the hidden one, etc. His entering into the universe is given as the reason for the whole universe being his own form. Thus, this universe having no origin, existence, or end outside Brahman, it is not quite a distinct thing from Brahman. Accordingly, the learned say, his Shaktis or energies form the whole world, and the Mahesha or the Great Lord is the energetic Shaktiman. Never can energy exist distinct from the energetic. Unity of these two is eternal, like that of fire and heat, inasmuch as inseparateness always exists between energy and the energetic. Wherefore the supreme energy belongs to the supreme Atman, since the two are related to each other as substance and attribute. The energy of heat is not conceived to be distinct from fire, and so on. Vyasamhita too says, from Shakti up to earth, the whole world is born of the principle Shiva. By him alone it is pervaded, as the jar, etc., by clay. His variegated supreme Shakti, whose form is knowledge and bliss, appears as one and many, like the light of the sun. The following passage of the Sruti speak of the Parabrahman as possessed of infinite powers of creating, ruling, and maintaining the world, all inherent in him. His supreme Shakti is spoken of as manifold, inherent, and imbued with the activity of knowledge and life. One verily is Rudra, they are not for a second, who rules these worlds with the powers of ruling. In short, on the authority of Sruti, Smriti, Itihasa, Purana, and the saying of the learned, the supreme Shakti, whose manifold manifestation this whole universe of Chit and Achit is, whose being is composed of supreme existence, intelligence, and bliss, and is unlimited by space and time, is inherent in the nature of Shiva, the supreme Brahman, and constitutes his own essential form and quality. Apart from Shakti, he cannot be the omniscient, the omnipotent, the cause of all, the all-controlling, the all-adorable, the all-gracious, the means of attaining all aspirations, and the omnipresent. And moreover, such grand designations as Maheshvara, the Supreme Lord, Mahadeva, the Supreme Deity, and Rudra, the expeller of pain, cannot apply to him. Thus it is Brahman whose body is the whole sentient and insentient universe, and who is denoted by all words. Just as the word blue denotes not the blue color only, but also the lotus which is of blue color, so the word universe also denotes Brahman. Therefore, such passages as all is Rudra verily teach that Brahman is denoted by all words. Accordingly, the passage all this verily is Brahman refers to Brahman whose body the whole of the sentient and insentient universe is. The universe being thus a form of Brahman, and being therefore not an object of hatred, etc., let everyone be peaceful at heart and worship Brahman. This doctrine is clearly expounded, even in the Puranic texts such as the following. The body of the God of gods is this universe, moving and unmoving. This the Jivas Pashus do not know, owing to the mighty bondage. They say sentiency is Vidya, and insentiency avidya. The whole universe of Vidya and avidya is no doubt the body of the Lord, the Father of all, for the whole universe is subject to him. The word Sat is used by the wise to denote the real and the good, and Asat is used by Vedic teachers to denote the contrary. The whole universe of the Sat and the Asat is the body of him who is on high. Just as by the watering of the roots of a tree its branches are nourished, so by the worship of Shiva the universe, which is his body, is nourished. Atman is the eighth body of Shiva, the Parameshvara pervading all other bodies. Wherefore the whole universe, if ensouled by Shiva, if any embodied being whatsoever be subjected to constraint, it will be quite repugnant to the eight-bodied Lord. As to this there is no doubt. Doing good to all, kindness to all, affording shelter to all. This they hold is the worshipping of Shiva, and so on. Brahman being all formed, it is but right to say all is Brahman, and let every one be peaceful and worship Brahman. Wherefore it is Brahman who in the opening passage is stated to be the object of worship. That is also spoken of as Manomaya, as partaking of the nature of Manas, and so on. Neither should it be supposed that the partaking of the nature of Manas is a characteristic mark of a samsaran. For Brahman may limit himself by assuming a shape which can form an object of worship. The slight difference there is between the way the subject is treated by Srikantha and that of Saint Mikandar has to be noted. Srikantha calls this relation following Badarayana as one of cause and effect, and calls it as a peculiar apurva parinama, in which the efficient cause is not affected by the change, as in an ordinary case of causation, and yet his illustration of soul and body would seem to bring, if not quite within causation at all. Shivajnana Yogi distinguishes between two kinds of tadatmyam. One thing appears as two, as guni and guna, substance and attribute. This is one kind. Again, two things might be so connected as to be regarded as one. This is also tadatmyam. And this later relation is what is called Advaita, and the former relation is simply known as Tadatmyam. And Srikantha would seem to conform himself to Tadatmyam first described. Professor Max Mueller would not seem to understand the importance of the distinction between Kapila's Sankhya and Patanjali's Yoga, called also Seshvara Sankhya. He says in his Six Systems of Philosophy that the sutra Devotion to God is not very important and is only one of the various means of obtaining Kaivalya. We have dwelt at length on the difference between the nirvana as postulated by Buddha and that of the Siddhanti in our notes to Shivajnana Siddhyar, Paraprakasham under Buddhism, and also Paraprakasham under Buddhism, and also in our paper on the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Buddhism postulated Pashachaya, freedom from desire and pain, but Siddhanta postulates in addition Patijnana, entering into the Brahma Nirvana or Shivanubhavana, and we have shown how, with all our effort, Pashachaya will not be practicable unless there is Patijnana. This thing is best illustrated by the simile of crystal or mirror and colors, used by both Sankhyans and Yogins, by the juxtaposition of a red flower with a mirror. The mirror is tinged by the reflection of the red flower. So the soul, when in relation with the world, is affected by the world, and death and birth and pain arise. According to the Sankhyan, the soul will regain its freedom when it knows that it is different from the colors reflected in itself, and it is not affected by the colors or reflection, and the gaining of this knowledge is secured to it by the action of pradana itself. But is it possible for the soul to attain this knowledge by its own effort, or the effort of the pradana? If so, let us examine the illustration itself. The mirror and red flower came into juxtaposition, and the reflection was caused on the mirror. But did they come into juxtaposition by the effort of the mirror or the effort of the red flower? Let us take it that somehow they came into juxtaposition and could not help coming into this position. Having been placed into juxtaposition, how could the reflection now present on the mirror be removed? Could this be done by any effort of the mirror or by any effort of the red flower? There being nothing but the soul and pradana, or mirror and red flower, according to the Shankyan, how could this release be effected? It is clear that under the circumstances stated by the Shankyans, there is no possible way out of the difficulty, and the juxtaposition must forever remain fixed, and there can be no release and no freedom and no moksha, unless it be in name. The ever-recurring cycle of births and deaths should go on forever and ever, but it being noted that the yogins use the same figure, is there really no way by which the mirror can get rid of this reflection? Yes, there is, but this will require a slight examination as to how the reflection itself was caused. Suppose the position between the mirror and flower remained fixed as ever, could we see the reflection at night? No. Why not? Because the essential condition of the reflection itself being thrown on the mirror is the presence of light or the sun, and it is the essential presence of the sun that we had forgotten all the time we were using the figure of the crystal and flower. Well, at night time, when there is no reflection and no knowledge of tinging, this is the Kevala condition of the soul. In this condition of the soul, it is devoid of all Ichcha and Kriya, and it is not even conscious that it is undergoing pain, without knowing how to get rid of the pain. As the sun dawns, the reflection is felt on the mirror, and by means of this conjunction, the soul's Ichcha and Kriya are aroused, and it experiences both pleasure and pain, sins and suffers, and by suffering gains experience and freedom. As the sun travels over and nearer the crystal, the shadow of the red flower will grow less and less still. At noontime, when the sun is at the nearest point to the crystal, it will be covered with a blaze of light that you cannot see, and the image of the flower will be lost. In the former position, the mirror was one with the red flower, Banda one or Advaita in Anava, and in the latter condition, the mirror was one with the sun, Moksha, one or Advaita in God. This is the position of the yogi or the theistic Shankya, and the importance of the doctrine of devotion to God will now be manifest, though Chitta Nirodha should necessarily precede it. See Devaram, the soul by its own effort or that of Padana cannot get rid of its mala. Neither of them could be energized by their own will and power, unless the supreme will and power thought, "May I become many," and so willed all creation and evolution. And the freedom from the world and desire from the thirst after birth and death cannot be gained, unless the soul rests its desire in God or becomes devoted to Him. That this is the only way of securing freedom from mala is set forth distinctly in the 10th and 11th sutras of Shiva Jnana Bodham, treating as they do of Pashachaya and Patijnana. These sadhanas are becoming one with God, dedicating one's acts to God, and unceasing love and devotion to God. By such dedication and devotion, it brings itself in harmony with the divine law, and loses its pride of self and knowledge. Karma and ignorance cease to operate. The man's whole being becomes covered with the flood of his grace. This love and devotion to God, who is love himself, begets joy and bliss, which completely fulfills our highest desire. Unlike the joys of the world, which ever and anon create a gnawing desire, a thirst after such more and more, like the unquenched thirst of the confirmed drunkard. This supreme bliss, rest, and joy fill our hearts like the flood brooking not its banks, when in all humility and love our body and soul are devoted to His service. When this joy fills him, then does he revel in God, delight in God, and rest in God, as the Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.4 puts it. Then does he love God, delight in God, revel in God, and rejoice in God, and become a Svaraj, and Lord and Master of all the worlds, as the Chandogya Upanishad 725.2 puts it. In this condition of Swaraj, when he is fully God-filled, even when he moves about, there laughing or eating, playing or rejoicing, be it with women, carriages, or relations, Chandogya Upanishad 8.12.3, these actions will not affect him, as fire cannot burn a man skilled in Agni Stamba. See principles stated in Shivajnana Siddhyar 10.5 and 6. This position has therefore to be clearly distinguished from the ethics and psychology of both Buddhists and Shankyans. The yogi and the Siddhanti believe that true salvation can be secured only by such self-renunciation and love to God, that it is only possible to get rid of our mala by attaining ourselves to the Supreme Parameshvara is brought out also by Saint Tiruvallur. Desire the desire of him who is desireless. Desire his desire, so as desire may leave you. The true support who knows rejects support he sought before. Sorrow that clings shall cease, and cling to him no more. The two kinds of dark karma will cease from one, whose praise is, he is devoted to God. Compare this with the Christian aspiration after divine joy. If to any the tumult of the flesh were hushed, hushed the images of earth and waters and air, hushed also the poles of heaven, yea, the very soul be hushed to herself, and by not thinking on self, surmount self, hushed all dreams and imaginary revelations, every tongue and every sign, and whatsoever exists only in transition, since if any could hear all these say, we made not ourselves, but he made us that abideth forever. If then, having uttered this, they too should be hushed, having roused only our ears to him who made them, and he alone speak, not by them, but by himself, that we may hear his word, not through any tongue of flesh, nor angel's voice, nor sound of thunder, nor in the dark riddle of a similitude, but rather hear whom in these things we love, might hear his very self without these, as we too now strained ourselves, and in swift thought touched on that eternal wisdom, which abideth over all. Could this be continued on, and other visions of kind far unlike be withdrawn, and this one ravish and absorb and wrap up its beholder amid these inward joys, so that life might be forever like that one moment of understanding, which now we sighed after. Were not this, enter into thy master's joy? St. Augustine. We have used above the illustration of crystal and colors, whether that of the red flower or the variegated clouds. Pure water is crystalline in its nature, and it reflects and refracts light just as a prism does. This water is discolored and affected by the dirt in it, and when our ahankara and the dirt subside, the water regains its own pure clear nature, and then the reflection of the Supreme One fills it with his glory, and this is the truth contained in the famous central verse, Hridaya Shloka, in St. Tirumular's Tirumantaram. O ye fools that speak of the unspeakable, can ye see the limits of the limitless one? To one whose mind gains clearness as the waveless sea, will appear faultless the Lord with the braided hair. The Shaiva religion and Shaiva Advaita Siddhanta philosophy. Professor Max Mueller, in his last great work on the 6 systems of Hindu philosophy, has remarked as follows. The longer I have studied the various systems, the more I have become impressed with the view taken by Vijnana Bhikshu and others that there is behind the variety of the 6 systems a common fund of what may be called national or popular philosophy, a large Manasa lake of philosophical thought and language far away in the distant north and in the distant past, from which each thinker was allowed to draw for his own purposes, and it would have certainly surprised him if one had told him that one need not go neither to the distant north nor to the distant past to discover what this national or popular philosophy was, from which each thinker drew his own inspiration, and a study of the 2 popular Hindu religions of modern India, we mean Shaivism and Vaishnavism, will convince anyone that they inherit today all the thought and traditions of bygone ages, as the modern Hindus themselves represent lineally their old ancestors who were settled in Bharatakanda since the days of the Rig Veda, and their religion of today is as much a living faith, suited to all sorts and conditions conditions of men, whether peasant or pandit, sinner or saved. Shaivism is based on the Vedas and Agamas. Shaivism, comprising in its fold Shaktism and Gunapatyam, and worshippers of god Subramanya, etc., counts among its followers the majority of Hindus, and it accordingly claims to represent the old traditional and parent religion of the days of the Vedas and Upanishads, Agamas, or Tantras, and Itihasas and Puranas, and bases its authority on these ancient revealed books and histories. It claims God Shiva to be the author of the Vedas and Agamas. Says Sri Nilakantha Shivacharya in his Sutra Bhashya, "We see no difference between the Veda and Shivagama. Even the Vedas may properly be called Shivagama, Shiva being the author thereof. Accordingly, Shivagama is twofold, one being intended for the three higher castes, the other being intended for all. The Vedas are intended for people of the three castes, and the other for all. Shiva alone, as the author of the Veda, is declared in the following passages of Sruti and Smriti. He is the Lord of all Vidyas. The Veda is the breath of the mighty being. Of these 18 Vidyas of various paths, the original author is the wise Sulapani himself. So says Sruti. It will be therefore important to trace modern Shaivism from the traditions and thought and language of the past. Its antiquity. The supreme polity of the Veda is sacrifice. Various gods, Indra, Vayu, Varuna, Agni, Hiranyagarbha, Soma, the sun, the moon, Vishnu, and Rudra are worshipped. Each is addressed as a most powerful deity, and his aid is invoked for all kinds of earthly blessing and freedom from evil. They are all supposed to represent various powers of nature and to idealize man's aspiration after the supreme. When we meet the text, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, and who is this one? Was any one god recognized above all others as the chief, as the god of sacrifices, as the Pati? And we have the following text from the Rig Veda. Tasmat Rudra Pashunamadipati, Rig Veda. Gathapatim Medapatim Rudram Jalasha Beshajam Tat Samyo Sumnamimahe, Rig Veda 1, Ashta 1. Mandukya Upanishad 26. We seek from Rudra, the Lord of songs, the Lord of sacrifices, who possesses healing remedies, his auspicious favor. Rigveda 143.4. As the Pati of all sacrifices, he is the fulfiller of sacrifices, Yajna Sadam, and Rudram Yajnam Sadhadishtim Abhasham. As the god of gods, he is said to derive his renown from himself, Rudraya Svayasase. His glory is said to be inherent, independent, or self-dependent. God, Svadavane, Rig Veda 746.1. He is also called Svapivata, which is variously explained as meaning readily understanding, accessible, gracious, he by whom life is conquered, he whose command cannot be transgressed, thou by whom prayers, words are readily received. He is called the father of the words, Bhuvanasya Pitaram. And the rich story of his becoming the father of the fatherless Maruts can be recalled in many a Puranic story, local legend, and common folklore. He is referred to in the text Antar Icchanti, Rigveda 8.61.3. His form as described in the Rig Veda is almost the same as the image of later days. He is called the Kapardin, with spirally braided hair. He is of Hiranya, golden-formed, and brilliant like the sun, and shining like gold. Yashukra, Ivasuryo, Hiranyam, Ivarochati, Rigveda 143.5, and in Rigveda 10, 136.1-7, he is the long-haired being who sustains the fire, water, and the two worlds, who is to the view the entire sky, and who is called this light. He is wind-clad, naked, and drinks visha, water or poison, and a Muni is identified with Rudra in this aspect. Rudra is derived by Sayana from the roots of Rut, Dravayita, meaning he who drives away sorrow, And consistent with this derivation, Rudra is called in the Rig Veda itself as the bountiful and the healer, possessed of various remedies, the later Vaidyanath, benign and gracious, and the term Shiva clearly appears in the following text of the Rig Veda 1092-9. Stomanva adya rudraya sikvase sayad viraya namasa didishtana yebhishiva svavan evayavabir diva Shikshati Svayasa Nikamabi. With reverence present your hymn today to the mighty Rudra, the ruler of heroes, and to the Maruts, those rapid and ardent deities with whom the gracious Shiva and opulent Rudra, who derives his renown from himself, protects us from the sky. If the gods, Indra, etc., personified individually the different powers of nature in the Supreme Personality of Rudra, will be found combined all these different powers. He is a thunderer and storm god, the father of the Maruts. He is Agni, he is Vayu, he is Varuna, he is Soma, he is the sun and moon. We have the high authority of Sayana, that Soma means Sauma. He deduces the story of Tripuradahana and Vishapana from two texts in the Rig Veda.